Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Mostly when you hear the word Vipassana, you think of formal meditation, and it of course does have that application, but Vipassana really is a state of mind rather than a formal practice. The practices are techniques or methods for developing and fostering that state of mind. Vipassana means clear seeing, and it refers to a particular way of dealing with holding the contents of consciousness. And it's a frame of mind that applies outside of formal meditation as well. Just in our daily lives, it's good to cultivate this kind of a clear seeing, to not fall into delusion and confused ways of seeing and understanding the contents of consciousness, which includes both the inner contents, that is our thoughts and feelings and memories and emotions, sensations in the body, but also external objects like the forms and sounds and smells and tastes that we encounter in the world. And the simplest way of defining this way of seeing, this clear seeing, is that it is seeing in accordance with reality. There's a quality that is called yata bhuta jnana dasana, the knowledge and vision of things as they are, or things in their own nature, or according to reality. And this means taking the contents of consciousness that are streaming into the mind multiple times every second. In a blink of an eye, there are many, many moments of consciousness, discrete objects that are arising to the mind, and seeing them without manipulation or coloring them or avoiding them or holding on to them, but just seeing them in their own nature as they actually are. And this can be developed in meditation, this attitude of mind, in a formal way, and can be done with a great deal of precision. But in ordinary life, we're active and we're experiencing many different sources of stimulus, and it becomes more difficult to have that degree of precision. But we can still train ourselves to see things in a fashion closer to truth or reality. There's a story in one of the Mahayana texts from the Huayan school about the golden lion outside the palace. There's a statue of a golden lion outside the palace in the royal city, and it describes how different people see the lion. There's an ignorant, illiterate peasant from the back country who's never been to the big city before, and he sees the lion and he becomes afraid. He thinks it's a real lion and he runs away. And the ordinary city folk, they see the lion and they know it's a statue. Someone who is himself a sculptor will be able to see the statue of the lion critically and judge its quality of the form. A goldsmith will focus on the metal and will know if it's a pure gold or if it's adulterated, and then goes into different philosophical schools and how they understand it's made of atoms, or it's essentially void, or it's a result of perception. These are ways of understanding and apprehending the same stimulus, the same external reality. So seeing things according to their own nature has different aspects. One aspect is seeing things in their own particular quality and not muddling everything up. In the Satipatthana Sutta, it talks about the basis of mindfulness in body, feelings, mind, and mind objects. And one of the repeated refrains is, in the body, there is just the body. In feelings, there's just feelings. In mind, there's just mind. In mind objects, there are just mind objects. Meaning these things are seen separately and discretely, and we don't confuse them and mix them up. This is one of the reasons the Buddha gave the teaching on the five khandhas, so we could see how the different components of body and mind operate, and we can have some understanding. There's the body, there's feelings, there's perception, there's mental constructions, and there is consciousness. I think in terms of clear seeing, there's a number of things we could say about the relating to the five aggregates. One is the importance of understanding perception and how it works and what its role is in our understanding of the world. The objects that arise through the sense organs, say a vision, a sight, a visual form, is apprehended in a very raw, unfiltered manner by the sense consciousness of the eye, which sees just color and shape. And even that is not really a complete or full or necessarily true experience of reality, because there are ways that eye consciousness can be fooled. You know, if you have some injury to the eye, or if you are nearsighted as I am, and if you leave your glasses off, you'll see different shapes and forms, not as precise. You know? But this is the closest we get on a physical level to an apprehension of reality. We get this raw data of shapes and forms. But then that's worked over by perception. And perception takes the color and shape and perceives as a separate step in cognition. It perceives from that color and shape a tree or a chair or a house or whatever it will be. It makes sense of the incoming data. And perception is much more subject to being fooled even than eye consciousness, because perception has a creative aspect, and it essentially is a mental function that takes information and makes a simulation, a model of the outer world based on those sense inputs. which is what we actually experience, is this mental model or image, a shadow of the outside world. And if you're a normal person, then your mental model, it will be close enough to reality to be functional. But there are people who have serious delusions and they have hallucinations and they see things that aren't there, and this is their perception creating something less tied to reality. I like to give the example to see the creative aspect of perception. A very good example that I think everyone at some time has experienced is being in a relaxed mood and looking at clouds in the sky and letting your mind play, and you'll see shapes and animals and faces, and they can actually be quite realistic and detailed. And that's perception that's being given a little bit of freedom to create. And at night when we dream, perception is completely untethered from the sense organs and it creates whole worlds. But essentially that's the same function as in the daytime. We're essentially dreaming all the time, but the dream is based on, is tightly controlled by information coming in. Another thing to understand are feelings. This are the Vedana, the hedonic or emotional reaction, the immediate reaction to sense contact of feeling pleasure, pain, or neutral. And the advice in the Satipatthana Sutta is that in the feelings there just be feelings. But if we're not careful, then the feelings color the perception. It gets jumbled up and we don't clearly separate, this is the perceived reality and this is the felt response. Likewise with mental formations, to see in the thoughts just thoughts, and the memories just memories, and in the emotional states just emotional states. Not to invest them with a reality that's not in their nature. All this is not always easy. The kind of ordinary, untrained, worldly way of experiencing is to kind of jumble everything together so that we see something that's unpleasant. Then the feeling of unpleasantness arises and mental fabrications arise, thinking about it or how much we dislike it or whatever, and this may amplify the feelings and it colors the perception, and it can create reactions in the body that are felt as physical sensations. And as one of the work of Vipassana is to separate the components and see the individual factors. This is difficult enough in meditation. People have trouble with it in meditation, but in ordinary life it's more difficult, but it's something we should strive to see and understand. One approach to this is to make the effort to see the mental constructions, the sankharas, as being empty. All the five khandha are empty, but particularly speaking now about sankharas, to see their ephemeral void nature. People can, and I think everybody falls into it from time to time, you can suffer a great deal just because of your mental formations. There are thoughts and emotions, memories, and if they're not seen in their own nature as they actually are, which is dependently arisen, impermanent, and empty, then they can cause suffering. But if they're seen as they are, just as empty, and not given an artificial weight and significance that they don't have, then they have no power to cause you to suffer. This is just a mental formation. This is empty. This is not substantial in any way. Or, a very simple way of expressing this, a way of saying it, is don't take your thoughts and emotions so seriously. Don't get caught up in giving them value or importance. So related to this is another quality that is essential for clear seeing, is the state of equanimity, upekkha. This is a very important mental quality, and it has different aspects. And the simplest form of equanimity is just neutral feeling, adukkam asukham. That's not particularly spiritually advanced or takes any kind of development. It's just a natural reaction to things that are neither pleasant or unpleasant. We just feel neutral about them. So that's the simplest, basic form of upekkha. The highest form is upekkha towards specific objects. The Pali name for this is tatra majjhatata, specific neutrality. Or literally, if you break down the roots of the word, it's quite neat. It means the state of middleness about that, or the state of being in the middle about that. Tatra is that. It means a specific pointing to a specific thing. So in formal meditation, doing disciplined Vipassana, that's a very important quality that is to be developed, is to hold each specific object with the same attention. And a good rule of thumb is nothing is so trivial it can be ignored, and nothing is so important it needs to be held. But just to treat everything exactly the same as just an object of consciousness. This is made difficult by the tendency of the mind to invest some objects with significance because of emotional resonance. Some particular objects may cause you to feel happy or sad or fearful, and this then disturbs the flow of tatra majjhatata. You're not giving that object the same attention it deserves. You're investing it with significantly more importance than it actually has. And in daily life, this difficulty is multiplied. The quality of specific neutrality, or tatra majjhatata, can be developed in activity with learning the skill of attention to detail. Paying attention to the details of what you're doing. Giving attention to the small components of a task, for example. It's one of the real secrets of skillful or beautiful work, is attention to detail. And then the larger form takes care of itself if you pay attention carefully to the details. So this is neutrality or equanimity towards objects, specific objects. There's also equanimity as a a state of mind, of being equanimous, being peaceful, not letting yourself become upset or agitated, but remaining calm in all situations. Having this inner harmony that you just deal with situations as they come up with their own difficulties or challenges or opportunities without becoming upset or agitated or excited. This is related to the teaching about avoiding falling into the 8 worldly dhammas. Or one Tibetan phrase they use is the 8 worldly winds. Milarepa finds Rinpoche despondent in his meditation cave, and he says, "Rinpoche, what's the matter? Are the 8 worldly winds howling through your cave?" These are praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and infamy, and pleasure and pain. And if we allow ourselves to be driven by the worldly dhammas, it's like a roller coaster ride. You get praise and you feel happy and you're all puffed up. Somebody's giving you good praise. It said you're doing a good job, you're a nice person. And then the next person you meet disparages you, calls you down, says you're a bum, you're no good. You feel miserable and downcast. If you don't let yourself overvalue these things, because they're all 8 of them are changeable, transitory, they come and go, they're not to be relied on, and they have no intrinsic value, and they're essentially unreal. So a lot of this, what I'm talking about, seeing things in their own nature, yata bhuti nanadasana, can raise the question, and what is actually real? What does it mean to see things according to reality? What is truth? What is real? And these are deep questions. These are the kind of questions that are well worth contemplating, and that will reward contemplation and attempts to penetrate the nature of reality. Truth, for example, can be a slippery concept, and it's important to distinguish levels of truth. It's not strictly a binary thing, true and false. There is ultimate truth and conventional truth. Ultimate truth are the Paramattha Dhammas, are things like the Four Noble Truths, or in Abhidhamma, the individually occurring momentary Dhammas are the ultimate reality. That's the ultimate truth. They're the Paramattha Dhammas. In terms of Abhidhamma philosophy, that means that you can't analyze reality any further. Once you've analyzed it down to the Paramattha Dhammas, then that is the ultimate reality, the ultimate understanding. So seeing the golden lion is composed of momentary dhammas. The conventional truth is a kind of a shorthand or an approximation. And those are the ordinary truths of the world and of daily life. Seeing what is true in terms of functionality. One of the examples that's often used in the suttas, distinguishing between, or not so much in the suttas, doesn't talk about this so much, but in the commentaries and the Abhidhamma, to distinguish between levels of truth, is the concept of a person. It's conventionally true to say so and so is walking down the street. It's a conventional reality, but that assumes the reality of a person. But on an ultimate level, there's no self, there's no inherent self nature, and it's only a movement of momentary dhammas in this configuration of the five khandhas. But we can't operate, we can't function in the world, in our dealings with each other and with the material universe, always on the level of ultimate reality. So we need to have this level of conventional truth as a way of dealing with things. A good metaphor for these levels of truth is if someone says the sun moves across the sky from east to west every day. On a higher level of truth, that's not true. The sun's not moving, the earth is rotating. But on a practical level, if you're trying to navigate by the sun to find your way through if you're lost in the woods, or you're out on open water on a boat, you're trying to find your directions, it's too abstract to think about the world turning against the sun. That would just confuse your thinking. But if you think of the sun moving across the sky, then it makes sense. It has a practical functional use. And it's true at that level. It's not a falsity to say that. The sun moves across the sky. It's not like you're saying something false. You would be saying something false if you said the sun moves every day from north to south. And that would be an example of a false statement. But to say it moves across the sky from east to west is a true statement, but it's a lower level of truth than to say the sun is stationary and the earth is rotating. So in understanding the conventional and ultimate levels of truth in Buddhist thought, it's important not to mix them up, and not to confuse them. And each level has a place. And as I said, this is particularly relevant to the concept of a person or a self. When we say there is no self, that's a higher level of truth. That's dealing in metaphysical or ontological or existential reality. But if you try and apply that on a conventional level, it then doesn't really work, because, and this is often a kind of naive objection to the teaching of not self. People say, well, of course I exist. Here I am. Here's my driver's license, got my picture on it. Of course I'm real. But that's a conventional level. You have to recognize a self and other people. This is the basis of compassion. And it's like the Brahma Viharas are essentially operating on this conventional level of persons. You have compassion for other beings. You wish them well, you give loving kindness. It's an abuse of the teaching of emptiness and of not self that has occurred historically from time to time. The idea, well, individual people don't matter, they don't count for anything because they're just collections of atoms and mental factors, and this was something that occurred historically in Japan with the samurai. Sometimes they would claim that because of the teaching of emptiness that they learned from the Zen masters, they would say, if I cut a guy's head off with a sword, there's no harm done. It's just empty atoms moving through empty atoms. And that everything is void, so there's no consequence to that. And that's an extreme example of muddling up conventional truth and ultimate truth. Because ultimately it's true. You just pass a sword through a guy's neck. It's just empty atoms going through empty atoms. But obviously it's a very cruel and violent act that causes suffering. There's an angle on this conventional truth and ultimate truth from another totally different angle, another tradition. There's a Sufi saying, trust in Allah, but tie your camel. And this is the same kind of idea. So in our ordinary activities in daily life, as I said, we can't be as precise and as focused and as detailed in our observation of phenomena as in meditation. But if we're in a deep state of Vipassana meditation, then we can't really function or do anything practical at the same time. We have to try and find a middle ground, a blending of the two. I had experience many years ago when I was doing a Vipassana retreat, and there was a certain time of the day I put aside for doing my household chores, like tidying up, sweeping the floor, and so on like that. And I was trying to maintain the meditation in this activity. And one day I found myself kind of paralyzed. I'd started sweeping the floor, and I was trying to be keenly aware of every bodily motion. But as soon as I noticed the intention to move, like I had the broom up in the air and I was going to bring it down, and I noticed the intention to move, and then it didn't go anywhere because I noticed it and it just dissolved. And so I couldn't continue with that motion, and then I just had to decide to, okay, I'm not going to be able to watch every single little thing while I do this. I just notice sweeping, sweeping. So there is uh, it is true that meditation is a kind of an artificial exercise. Well, that's its value, its benefit. You're putting yourself into an artificially disciplined and minute state of mind to observe what's going on. And you can gain great understanding and benefit from that. It's quite essential actually for the path. But it's not the whole of the path. Our actions in the world, what we do and say, and how we deal with each other and with the material universe is also part of the practice. And part of that is, as I say, compassion, but part of that is also wisdom, which is seeing things according to nature as they actually are. And that is fostered by equanimity and by the attempt to dispel delusion and not let reality be colored by emotional valuations, but just to see things in their own nature as they actually are, both internal and external.